Hi Kapeesh, welcome to this CTQ Smartcast.
Hi Harish, excited to be here.
Yeah. Kapeesh, you've been head of growth at Coursera. So there's a lot of inquisitiveness and curiosity about all of us here about what all we can, talk to you about with respect to the role of MOOCs in future relevance. So I'm going to, throw the first question, throw you in the deep end, right at the start. So what do you think is the role of MOOCs in thinking about future relevance?
Yeah, absolutely, Harish. So, if you think about what's happening in the world right now, technology is changing really rapidly, and it's really hard for people to keep up with that technological change. People's jobs are changing at a very rapid pace, which has never happened before. And that's really the space where MOOCs like Coursera and all of the other platforms are playing. And so all online learning platforms can really help people keep up with the pace of change of technology. So this is especially relevant if you're already working in a technology field like data science, machine learning, AI, software engineering, or if you're interested in breaking into any of these fields. Um, so that's really kind of the core use case that we are seeing today for MOOCs in a nutshell.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for putting it in a very concise manner. So, how should people really be looking at Coursera and the other options available in terms of immediate skilling that I'm missing out on this skill in my current responsibility role, so I should go and do something. Should be more in terms of certification and adding credentials, or thinking long term future events. So, is there a separate a different kind of a role that these platforms play for a corporate professional?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the answer is it's all of them. So the way we think about it is you can segment any learner or any person into a what we call career enhancer, an upskiller, or a reskiller. And so that's how when I was at Coursera we looked at it. So a reskiller is somebody who needs to completely change their skill set to get into a new job. So typically we would see this, somebody's driving an Uber and they want to become an entry level IT worker. They need to learn a completely new set of skills. Then there is upskillers, which is, let's say you're working as a data analyst and but you want to get into machine learning. So you have some skills that are relevant, but you want to still make a pretty significant jump. And then the third one is enhancers, which is, you're already somebody who's pretty happy with their career, but you're really motivated. You want to just continue to enhance your skills and grow even faster. And so I think the same person could be in these three buckets at different times in their life. Right? You might start as a reskiller, then become an upskiller, then become an enhancer, or go back and forth. So the way you think about online learning kind of really changes depending on which category you're in. So what we see is for somebody that's a reskiller, you typically want very meaningful, substantive program that will actually get you all the skills you need for a new role, and then you need a lot of additional support and services as well to actually sort of train you to how to interview and like get that job. And if you're a reskiller, you may be afraid of like jumping right into the program, and so you might want to do some preparatory work before that. For upskillers, you don't need like a full program. You might need shorter content, but certifications might still be quite relevant for you to actually show employers that you have made that jump and you qualify for the jump you want to make. And for enhancers, it's purely about developing yourself, and there I think is where people can take a slightly longer term perspective and think about not just like I need to make this presentation, I'm missing some skills, but also like how can I develop my leadership skills or strategy or design thinking skills to help me over the next several years. So that's generally at a high level how people can think about different types of offerings within MOOCs and what to take.
Right. Yeah. That's very interesting, Kapish. So, have you seen like what are the trends like? What are people doing more of? Is it reskilling, upskilling, or enhancement? And at different stages, and also probably geographical distribution might be different. Is that true?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the big trend that we have seen happen over the last year and a half, which is especially accelerated due to COVID, is there's a lot of people that are really looking to reskill and enter sort of tech jobs. And so that's the area where there is the fastest growth in the overall MOOC segment. And so you see a lot of people that are, especially, with COVID, a lot of service industry jobs were really disrupted. Definitely in the US, but globally as well. And so a lot of people who were out of work uh, turned to online learning to really kind of bolster their skill set. And people are thinking about, okay, I want to future-proof myself the next time anything like this happens. I want a job that is not disrupted. And people are seeing that people in tech jobs are just able to work from home, work remotely. There's all of that convenience, and so that's like one big shift or growth area that we are seeing. These entry level jobs can be anything from IT, customer service, so really kind of like low skill within the tech uh, ecosystem. Jobs that don't really require a college degree here in the US at least. And that set of content we're seeing actually grow across the board, both in the US as well as in India and in other markets. So it's truly a global phenomenon. The other area which is really big, obviously, is both kind of software and data science. But what we're seeing emerge is cloud, right? Like the cloud wars are on with Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and so we're seeing a lot of growth in cloud and IT certification. And so that's something that people are pursuing quite a lot of. Another interesting trend has been, there's been a lot of press about this, has been that with the pandemic, people are turning to a lot of courses on mental well-being and happiness as well. So people are, those who can afford to make the time are actually taking the time to invest in their own well-being as well.
Right.
So that's another kind of interesting trend.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And with with so many MOOCs and certifications, how can people really show that they have learned something? Is there a danger of these these certificates, or losing the value that credentials should ideally have? If you look at LinkedIn, you look at your feed, and someone or the other has done something in data science these days, right? And I'm wondering whether that person really knows something. It's like mushrooming these days. So is that a danger? Is that a valid fear?
I think it's definitely a valid concern, right? Like, and I would say that I think the trend is actually in the kind of opposite direction, which is in the early days of online learning. This is pre-Coursera, many for a couple of decades. Online credentials have had low signaling power, and because there has been this, or there used to be this stigma attached to online learning somehow being inferior to learning on campus. And I think as it kind of becomes more prevalent, I think that stigma is going away, and these credentials are being perceived as being more and more valid. Now, even on a platform like Coursera or Udemy, there's a big difference in the quality of different courses, right? And uh, the way the credential value works is at the base. I think when an employer sees that somebody has done the certification, you at least know that they are self-motivated and they know
Right.
something. You may not know like the extent of those skills. But then, there's a lot of courses now where the certification is actually backed by a much more rigorous exam, and you have an employer that's sort of vouching for those signals. So, for example, for Coursera, one of the areas of fastest growth is professional certificates, which are backed by companies like Google or IBM. And so that's a very strong signal to hiring managers and to learners that, okay, this actually means that they've learned something. And then what a lot of platforms are doing is now striking hiring partnerships. So it's not just about you've earned the credential, but there's employers on the other side saying that, okay, if you want this credential, then we'll give you an interview. And so those sorts of things are things to sort of look out for as a person who's sort of considering these certificates. If these things exist, that's sort of some proof that there's a lot of value in the job market attached to this. And then for a lot of MOOCs, I think especially for the career enhancers or in areas like leadership, for example, a certificate won't really be that useful. It's really about demonstrate about what you learn and your own self confidence and your own ability to demonstrate those skills.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So different areas will probably be seen in different light in terms of what you have been exposed to versus what you have done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So from a learner's point of view, what are the limitations of platforms like Coursera, like we just spoke about, exposure versus,
Yeah,
actually showcasing something.
yeah, yeah. So I think the one of the big challenges with kind of the MOOC type of learning experience, which is pretty self-paced, is if you're somebody that's really self-motivated, it works very well, but you need to bring quite a lot of motivation to the table. And if you fall behind, it's easy to just stop learning because you're mostly sort of by yourself. And so that is one limitation of the learning experience. And there's a lot of work happening to address that. For Coursera, there's a lot of investment in community to provide that kind of support. And then there's things like cohort-based courses, which are sort of trending again to sort of provide that community experience. The other one is because the price point is either free or it's really low, there isn't a ton of hands-on coaching or tutoring that's available. And so for somebody who wants that, who needs a lot of that kind of support and structure, that can be a limitation. Again, Coursera and others are doing a lot of things to address that at kind of really low or free price points. But those are kind of the two biggest limitations of the MOOC style experience. Now, Coursera solves that in a couple of ways, right? So Coursera has a portfolio of offerings at different price points for different needs. So Coursera has, the free content, and then there's the certificates, which have more scaffolding and support. And then there's like the online degree, which has, everything. And a lot of other companies or MOOC platforms are now sort of following the lead and building that strategy of this, what we call stackable credentials. So there's an offering at kind of every price point and every need that that a learner might have.
Right, right. And you mentioned cohort-based courses. What's your take on that? I mean, we see a lot of people offering cohort-based courses these days.
Yeah. I mean, so I think in general, the concept of learning in a cohort, I think that's how learning has happened. If you think about a traditional classroom, right, it's really a cohort-based course.
Correct.
So the concept, I think, makes a lot of sense. I think what it's really trending these days, and I think what people are really doing is enabling content creators from just putting up static content to actually sort of take people through the same type of community experience. Coursera has had cohort-based courses since its foundation. It's all been cohort-based, and even as we went from, I spent a couple of years working on this. Even as we went from cohorts offered once or twice a year to being fully on demand, we worked really hard to preserve a lot of the good aspects of cohort-based courses, right? So having a fixed schedule enables motivation. Having a community is both motivating. It helps guide through the course, and a lot of the value in a cohort-based course experience comes from the peer interaction and the peer feedback and the community that you gain. So I think that's all really positive. So I'm very bullish on the learning format. The downside of it is obviously, it requires a lot of effort to sort of maintain. So prices are higher and it's inflexible. So not everybody can go through it. So you're basically trading off reach for sort of more intense learning. So, there is a market for it for sure. And then the other thing that I really like about what's happening is this is enabling a lot more creators to create content than otherwise would have, and kind of very unique or different types of learning experience where purely content-based course may not have been as effective. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Right. Yeah, we've had ourselves, some interesting experiences running cohort-based programs. I wouldn't call them a course, but cohort-based
Yeah.
programs. And yeah, we got interesting feedback where people said, "Oh, we don't want to wait till the next month for the next cohort to start. Can we start something right now?" We said, "You'll miss out the whole experience of the group." They said, "No, we're okay with it because that's how they were wired." So
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting. So in fact, that brings me to the next question, Kapeesh. So what kind of groundwork can a learner do before committing to a MOOC?
That's a really interesting question. So I think it really depends on where you're starting. Um, that's so a lot of MOOCs are completely free and really sort of very, very beginner friendly. And so, I would say that for a lot of people, they don't need to do that much groundwork. They can just sort of, and you don't need to commit to a MOOC. You can just explore and see if you like it, and then go from there. In fact, what we hear um, from a lot of learners is, you know, somebody who's been out of uh, college for 15, 20 years. They've never really done any learning after college. They'll start off with a MOOC and be like, oh, and enjoy the experience and be like, oh wow, I can learn, I'm gaining skills, and that then builds the confidence in them uh, to then sort of continue learning. And then they go on to apply for degree programs or like sign up for much more difficult learning. So like that those kinds of stories really stick with me. So I would say the groundwork really depends on kind of what your starting point is. So the best preparation is to make sure you don't start with something that's really difficult. And so especially if it's somebody who is intimidated by a MOOC and feels the need for groundwork, I would say if I think about Coursera, there's a couple of our courses which are extremely popular. We have a course called Learning How to Learn, which actually teaches you kind of the fundamentals of how to learn effectively. That's actually a really good place to start.
Yeah.
And it's a fairly short course. And then, a lot of people come to Coursera to learn programming. And we have this course called Python for Everybody.
Right.
That's, a really great starting point. And, more than 2 million people have taken that course. And this fantastic professor named Dr. Chuck Severance. So finding those really easy, straightforward materials, whether it's a MOOC or something else, and just doing 30 minutes of learning can be really good groundwork in terms of building those habits or getting that early win to then continue learning.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, like I was mentioning earlier, as part of our CTQ compounds, we have something called as Future Stack, where we give exposure to 26 different topics in 26 weeks. It covers, the timeless skills like storytelling and, influencing and all those things, and also the upcoming things like, your AI, ML, AR, VR. We've seen people actually do this because in the 1 week, there's usually a primer and then some reflection around, where do they think that applies to their, to their day-to-day work. And then people say, oh no, this was great, but I have chosen to do, some online course on these 3 topics because now I see the connection between,
Yeah.
between those things. So that brings me to the next question, Kapeesh, that are you seeing more organizations looking to let employees take charge of their learning? We've heard of some startup founders who say that no, we don't have an L&D team, or nobody is looking after L&D. I've just given a budget to all my employees saying you can go sign up for any course and we will pay for it, right? Some people have said yes. A lot of people went and took courses, like you said. These are the self-motivated folks. lot of people said, "Oh, we've given that budget. Everyone knows that the budget is there, but nobody has actually utilized, that budget." So, are you seeing this trend where companies are saying, take care, take charge of your learning? And what are the pros and cons of it? Because the L&D teams the reason why I'm asking this is a lot of our audience also comes from that background. So they do this job of sort of identifying the skill gaps and telling the person that, see, this is what you need to pick up on. So if there's nobody telling me, and I don't have the sense to reflect upon where I stand, then how do I even find out what should I go and learn? So what is
Yeah.
your take on this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think the reality is a little bit nuanced. So, companies are adapting, online learning solutions like Coursera or LinkedIn Learning or Udemy, like in record numbers. Right? Like all of these companies are actually seeing a lot of growth in companies and organizations like buying their solutions. But I think there's like a few very sort of distinct patterns in how companies use any of these providers. So, and I think it really depends on whether the company is sort of an incumbent that is worried about digital disruption or if it is a disruptor. If you take an example of, let's say you're a large automobile manufacturer, then you are, especially in the US, there is this big trend towards electric cars. And if you think about what that means, it means that a pretty large chunk of your workforce probably does not have the skills that you will need over the next 5 to 10 years. And so there, the company is really worried about having to lay off all of their employees and them not having the skills that they need. And then they're also worried about attracting the talent which has the skills that they need because those people want to work for like Tesla or Google or what have you. And so there, the trend is really, the companies are putting in a lot of effort to help people identify the skills and tell them, exactly what kind of content or materials those people need to actually get the skills that will keep them relevant. And, those employees also tend to need that sort of guidance. And so that's, one clear trend that we see. And that's, one category. And there's a lot of industries and a lot of companies where that's happening. And then there's definitely a lot of companies where it's more of a perk. Learning is more of a perk that is offered to employees. We see that as a trend, but it's not as common. Another kind of big challenge that a lot of companies face is that the L&D teams really don't have the expertise or the skills to guide the employees or identify skills gaps. Or there's a lot of effort involved in mapping like the skills to content. And so what many companies are doing, and Coursera definitely has a big offering around this, sort of connecting the dots for the company. So in Coursera's case, we launched what we call, I think we started the pilot with data science. We called it Data Science Academy. And then we launched this product called Skill Sets, which basically helps, we have some pre-configured skill sets, but then we also let companies customize it. And so, if you're managing a data science team, you can work with Coursera, tell us what skills you want your employees to learn. And then we actually go map out our curriculum and like show you the learning content, which kind of best prepares you for those skills. And then for each of those skills, we'll give you a skill score, which is based on how you performed on those assessments and comparing it to everybody else on the platform who's taken those assessments. And, we use a model similar to chess ELO rankings to actually like determine your skill score. And then the managers can actually see what skills their employees are learning. And that kind of data and analytics is really helpful to companies for things like, internal mobility and so on. So there's kind of a long-winded answer, but really it's, I think companies are definitely letting employees take charge a little bit more. But the big need really is in to help people navigate digital transformation is to really provide a lot more kind of scaffolding and structure, and then like give people flexibility within that sort of broader structure.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's sort of addresses most of what I wanted to ask you on that particular question. So Kapish, before we move to the next section, I know you love your quizzing, and we have quizzed together in the past as well. So I'm not going to let you go without asking you some quiz questions. But
Yeah.
these are all quiz questions right up your alley, very closely related to you, what you've been doing. So let me start with the first one for today, and this I think this must be part of your syllabus by now. So Andrew
Yeah,
Nang,
I hope I get it.
yeah, so Andrew Nang, who co-founded Coursera, in an article he said, if a typical person can do a mental task with Dash, we can probably automate it using AI either now or in the near future. So what is that? So fill in the blanks for me.
I think it was like within a second.
Yeah, this
You
is
could, yeah.
I think you answered it within with less than 1 second of thought, Kapish. So this is going to be automated very soon by Andrew Nang, is it? Yeah,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
that was the right answer. He said with less than 1 second of thought,
yeah,
and we've actually used this line as a sort of context setting question for a lot of our discussions around people sort of reflecting upon what they're doing today. That sort of sets the tone in terms of thinking what is it that I'm doing today that can be automated, where a bot can come in and
yeah,
starts the thinking around future relevance, right?
right.
What is the value that I bring to the table? Yeah. So in that context, I thought this is a nice segue to the next section, and the first question in that in that section. So given this, whatever we've spoken about in the last 1 minute, how should Coursera be thinking about its future relevance? So who or what could be disrupting Coursera, and how can Coursera be relevant in say 2025, 2030? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the one I wrote this internal memo a few years ago where our team was talking a lot about uh, how what are the emerging trends in online learning, and what should we change based on that. And I like to think about, like, I think that's important to be aware of, but it's also important to think about what are the fundamental things that won't change, for the core needs that learners have, and how can we actually kind of continue to cater to those even better and better. And I think for Coursera, right, I think the simplest thing to really focus on is how can we help the three learner segments that I talked about, enhancers, upskillers, and reskillers, get even better and better career outcomes, because that's kind of the core audience, which is people seeking career outcomes in less time and at lower cost and like much better quality. And so what does that mean, right? I think a lot of the focus at Coursera right now is on two areas: reskillers, kind of people that are really being affected by sort of this broad theme of digital transformation, and then like people in our online degree programs. And in both of these areas, what Coursera is doing is really creating learning programs at a price point and a quality which has not really existed before, right? And partnering with companies and top companies and universities to do that. And so, just continuing to excel at that is going to be key. And, I think addressing some of the aspects which are not present in MOOCs, so like providing that, balancing the flexibility so that, like you said, people who want to start right now can start right now, but still giving them that sort of community and cohort experience. I think that's really important, so that people actually stick and complete and, get jobs. And then the second one is with online degrees, right? Like, I think degrees are still incredibly expensive, and quality is sort of all over the place. So figuring out ways to use technology and community in smart ways to really bring down the cost and reinvent the degree so that it's much more job relevant and industry relevant. I think those are the two sort of most important things for Coursera to sort of continue to maintain its kind of future relevance. And I say
Right.
that, as somebody who's no longer working there, but as I look broadly, those seem like the most important things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about any MOOC, the first term that comes to mind is course completion rates, right? So I had two questions here. So are there any telltale signs that sort of help you predict who is more likely to complete a MOOC? And given your all the experiments that you've conducted around
Yeah.
course completion, have there been any interesting insights that you've
Yeah.
gleaned?
Yeah. So, a lot has been written in the press, I think in the early days of MOOCs, about course completion rates. And that's really not the right metrics to think about, because the fundamental value proposition of a MOOC is, you have access to learning, and you can dabble, and you can see if you like it. And if you like it, then you can continue. Right. So it's almost like saying, what's the completion rate of a Wikipedia article? Like, who reads the whole Wikipedia article? I think so if you build on that, right, what are the telltale signs? I think um, sort of engagement is actually the biggest predictor of completion. So, if somebody has actually, in the first week, people are mostly, like testing the water, seeing if it's something that's right for them. But if somebody makes it past, say the first module or the first week of content, then that's one of the best predictors of whether they'll stick around and complete. And then the other one is, if somebody is interested in earning the certificate, so if they're paying you for the assessments and certificate, then that ends up being a pretty strong signal of, career interest and intent. And so that's a pretty strong predictor as well. I think those are both behavioral. I think, like data that we can observe about anybody. I don't have a great answer on, any demographic factors or mindset or so on, because those are hard to kind of observe as an online learning platform. Yeah, I don't have any kind of specific insights on that front.
All right, yeah. And in one of your, I don't know if it was an article or an interview, you spoke about good friction and bad friction. So that was very interesting. So do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. And I think the best way to talk about this is the example that you were alluding to earlier, right? Where you've had some programs which have been cohort based, and people have wanted, you to just make it available all the time because they don't want to wait. Um, and so, like making people not wait is removing friction. Making people wait is friction. Um, but and at Coursera, we experimented the article that you're talking about. We experimented with different course formats, making it removing all friction. Like, you don't need to enroll, you don't need to wait for a course to start. You can start learning right away. And what we saw in those experiments was, yes, you eliminate friction, you get a lot more people into your funnel. Definitely, you increase the people who start learning. But the downside is that they retain at a much lower rate and they complete at even lower rate. And so, yes, we eliminated friction, but the friction that we eliminated was good friction, because on balance, while some percentage fewer people started, way more people actually engaged and benefited from the learning. And so when you're building any product, there is going to be friction. And the question is figuring out the balance of, what's the right amount to have to deliver value to your users. So, you go to Facebook, you have to add friends, that's friction, but that gives you a lot of value in that your newsfeed is full, or you sign up for something like Pinterest or Quora, or there's an onboarding flow. Yes, that's friction, but it helps the app give you a lot more value. And so that's kind of good friction. So you always, as a product uh, manager or product team, you need to kind of constantly be tweaking or figuring out kind of where that balance lies for your particular user group.
Right, right. So, the next question that came to mind when you mentioned product manager. So, how did you train yourself to become a product manager? This was pre Coursera back in Zynga days. So, did you take up a course on Coursera?
I I think this is like, I think online learning was very, very nascent. I think there was no Coursera or Udemy back then. I didn't even know about product management, and product management was the first sort of job that I got straight out of grad school. But what I did when I was in school was I was very interested in working in tech companies. I both took courses that seemed kind of relevant, um, and then I also spent, I would go to various startups and just, offer to work for them for free to just learn about how to build products. And so, in terms of courses, I think the two courses in school that really helped me and kind of shaped my thinking around product management were, one was at Stanford Design School, which was called Design Thinking 101. It was the first class that I took, and the first day of the first class that I took in school, they asked me to go to a Japanese supermarket and redesign or reinvent ramen noodles. And that's when I was really hooked. And having come from mechanical engineering at College of Engineering Pune, I was like, what the hell is this? But that really hooked me on to sort of this whole design thinking process. And then a human computer interaction course, which I took on in the computer science department, which really talked about user experience design, software design. And that was kind of really foundational for me. But then I think product management is really something that you learn by doing. And so, working with a lot of those startups was what really helped me learn about how to build products. And then, the when I learned about Coursera, one of the cool things was, that human computer interaction course that really kind of shaped my thinking and helped me become a PM was one of the courses, most popular courses on Coursera. And that's what really attracted me to the company, which is, something that was so transformational for me, making that available to everyone in the world for free. Uh, but yeah, so that's kind of my short answer for how I trained myself to be a PM. When people ask me this question, I definitely recommend, taking that course, learning about a wide range of topics, like, learn a little bit about design and a little bit about, communication and leadership and, consumer behavior and psychology. But then I also just ask people to, try to do it, work on side projects and, really start to think about, building a product end to end.
Right, right. Yeah. And any other books or besides these courses, any specific go-to books that you would recommend to people who are just starting out in product management?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think now there are a ton of really great books and blogs and resources on product management. I think the books that were really helpful for me were, there's this classic High Output Management by Andy Grove, which I'm sure most people have heard of. But it's not about product management, but it's really helpful in terms of just being effective in any knowledge work kind of role. The other resources that I think are really helpful these days are a couple of online kind of blogs and newsletters. So there's this guy, Gibson Biddle, who used to work at Netflix, has a very popular newsletter called Ask Gib that I like a lot. And then Lenny Rachitsky is another former product manager from Airbnb, has a very popular newsletter and community. So those two, I think, are excellent resources. And then a book that I have liked is it's called Product Leadership, which has examples from like a lot of different product managers. So those are some of my favorite ones. Um, the couple of others that I think are good for like specific use cases. So a big part of the PM role at Coursera is definitely around evaluating product market fit and talking to learners and so on. There's this book called Talking to Humans and Testing with Humans. These are two books by this guy named Keith Constable, I think. Those are books that I give to a lot of PMs who join my team. Kind of really short, like 1 to 2 hour reads and tell you about how to actually do user research and get useful insights.
Right, right. Yeah. So we'll link to all of these resources in the show notes.
Right.
Uh, I'm going to put you in the spot here, Kapeesh. So what do you know about product management that others don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think if you look at when I think about like all the product management advice that's out there, a lot of it focuses on frameworks and product market fit and all of that, but and ideation and so on. But in a great team, a lot of times, as a product manager, you're not really the one who's doing all of the work. You're really leading a team of engineers, designers, a lot of other functions, and that team is really coming up with the answer. And so I think the key to sort of really successful or great product managers is they have the ability to actually facilitate a discussion and lead a team and help the team solve the problem and not necessarily be the one that's like solving the problem. So product management is a lot more about sort of team leadership without the formal leadership authority than what most people think. And the more I do product management, the more I've come to sort of learn and appreciate this. And I think it's not as well understood as it ought to be, especially for PMs that are kind of new or early in their career.
Right, right. So, basically bring insights and learning from a variety of areas. And I think the human-centered, interaction is something which is very important in getting your, product management jobs right.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So one more question, Kapish. What would you recommend for a product manager in terms of building the right kind of habits? You talked about the kind of books that you would give to your team members, new members to your team. So using a platform like Coursera, is there a way that people can build good habits from a product manager standpoint, both for themselves as well as for their team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, to keep learning, I think you have to be extremely curious. And, so I I tend to be very curious and, read widely. I don't know how you cultivate curiosity, but, figuring out a way to be curious about kind of the world around you is really important, and cultivating that in your team. Using platforms like Coursera, I think one thing that's been successful is for me, and I've seen others do it, is have study groups or reading groups. So you pick a topic, or you pick a book, or you pick a course, and then you do it together as a team, and then you discuss it in team meetings. That's been a really healthy way for a lot of teams I know to sort of create the habit of learning, above and beyond just being super motivated and doing it on your own. And then creating the space as a manager. I think if you can create the space for your team to actually do it on during working hours, because that definitely helps. That's easier said than done, I think, in most companies, but it is the most effective way to cultivate those habits.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. We know all about that. We do
Yeah,
some of that ourselves for for some of our clients, so we know how difficult it is. But people having the right commitment have been able to manage that.
yeah.
So one interesting thing that I saw, I was going through your Goodreads page, and I think I just connected to it in the show notes as well, just to give people an idea of the breadth of reading that you do, right? You've covered so many different themes and topics there, and that brings me to the next quiz question that I have for you. So the origin of this somewhat unlikely meme is a Tumblr meme started by a second year student at NYU Law School, disappointed by a certain decision, certain decision. I'm not going to tell you anything more. So the student created the meme inspired by this photo of rapper Biggie Smalls, accompanied by a play of words on another nickname of his. So name the subject of this meme. And this is a book that you've read, so that's
Oh
why
wow.
I picked this up. I don't think
So
this would have got
what
covered in the book, but
I have no idea.
okay, I'll tell you the decision. So the student was disappointed by a Supreme Court decision about voting rights.
Is this is the notorious Well, the book, I guess, is the Notorious RBG.
Yeah. So it is so RBG was the subject of this meme, and it comes from
Oh, yeah,
Steve
yeah.
Foss's other nickname, which is BIG, right?
Got
So
it.
that's
Okay.
where the RBG came from. So yeah, so to become a great product manager, you also need to learn about history, politics, feminism, parenting, everything, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much my reading helps with me as a PM, but it's just something that I enjoy doing. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So coming to the next section, Kapish, you've decided to take a sabbatical now. So talk us through this decision. What keeps you busy? Are you reading more books these days?
Yeah. So that's that with kind of what led me to the decision. So, I've been at Coursera for the last 7 years. And, I think, going all the way back, a while ago, I watched this TED talk by a designer named Stefan Sagmeister. And the name of the talk is The Power of Time Off. And he talked about how, so he is a designer that my wife and I, who is also a designer, really like his work. And so in the talk, he talked about how every 7 years he shuts down his studio and takes a year off, and how it just lets him explore different ideas and creativity and so on. I've kind of been enamored by the idea of taking time off ever since I watched that talk, 10 years ago. That was when I was still in college. I tend to be the kind of person who kind of gets really heads down, like once I'm focused on something. And so um, every time I thought about kind of, leaving Coursera and moving on, the thought of just, interviewing and, talking to three companies and then like picking one of those jobs and then committing to it for the next, kind of 4 or 5 years, didn't really seem that attractive to me. And so that was really the big motivator for me to kind of, leave my job and just take the time off, because what you do with one of the most important decisions you can make is figuring out like, okay, what is it you're going to do. And at least here in Silicon Valley, right, like startups are all consuming, right, like you are just uh, working extremely hard. So I wanted to a sort of decompress a little bit before I kind of joined that next roller coaster, and also pursue a lot of interests which I have not had as much time for, and explore uh, different areas um, before I kind of pick something to work on. So that was kind of my motivation. In terms of what keeps me busy, I think I'm reading a little bit more, but not as much as I would like to. I think I'm spending a lot of time with my daughter. I'm taking courses on Coursera. I'm like learning to code, and then I'm just sort of meeting a lot of people and networking, reconnecting with former colleagues and friends and so on. And then also advising a couple of startups, especially Coursera being one of the biggest education IPOs, where like there's a lot of education or kind of workforce development related companies that I think I can help quite a bit. So I'm trying to do a little bit of that, and that's been sort of really fun.
Right. So a lot of people, I'm sure, consider this at some point of time. Like you said, you considered this when you were still in school. So,
Yeah.
what would your advice be to people? How should they think about taking a sabbatical? What should they watch out for? What should they, aim for? I don't know whether you should have an aim for a sabbatical,
Yeah.
but what is it that they should
Yeah.
watch out for?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I actually wrote like a blog post about this as well. So I think, for people who are considering this, and for me this was a very difficult decision. I kind of agonized over this for a while. I think, it's definitely a luxury if you can sort of make it work. Uh, I think, financially, you want to be sort of secure financially before you do this, because otherwise you'll just constantly be stressing out about financial matters instead of sort of enjoying the sabbatical. I think what separates a sabbatical from a vacation is that there is some sort of goal or intentionality behind it. And a lot of people, who reached out to me saying like, hey, I really want to do this as well. Now that, after kind of, I've been thinking about this. Uh, a lot of them have some intention or goal in mind, but a lot of them don't. And they're like, yeah, but I'm worried about what I'll do. And to me, I think that's an indication of, you're just sort of burnt out or you need a vacation as opposed to you need kind of an extended sabbatical. So the biggest advice I would have is, think of at least some sort of loose goals to give like a sense of like direction to kind of your time off. The other thing, I kind of polled my network, like the people that I knew who had done this before, and I got their advice. And I think a couple of things that are really important are, you know, um, having some structure. So I'm still figuring this out myself, but it's really important to have structure to your days and structure to your weeks. Otherwise, time just flies by. So even though it's time off, I still try to sort of keep a regular rhythm to the day, have some goals every day. Another one is, one of the best pieces of advice I received is think about sort of unique experiences with unique people. And so this was from the CEO of Coursera, who took, 2.5 or 3 years between his previous CEO role and Coursera. And he was like, your family, your wife, your kids, you're going to be hanging out with them all the time. But when you have this extended time off, you can actually hang out with people that you won't normally hang out with. So, take a trip with like an aunt that you rarely see, or, with your grandparents, or, a friend that lives in a different city that you don't get to meet. And so I thought that was really, really good advice. And so I'm trying to think about how do I incorporate that in my own time off.
Right. Or do podcast interviews like this.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Kapish. So that was nice. So that brings us to the end where I'm going to ask you for your hot takes on a few things. So I'm going to give you some things, terms, words, and I want your hot take on that. So, what do you think is the future relevance of Silicon Valley for startups?
I think it's going to be more and more relevant. Um, I think, well, I think I'm seeing a lot of startups be kind of distributed, and a lot of startups will come up from outside of Silicon Valley as well. But I don't see the relevance of Silicon Valley going down by a lot uh, in the long term. I think the concentration of talent is kind of is unique, and I think here to stay.
Right. Okay. What do you think is the future relevance of universities?
I think universities are really resilient, and as the world has changed over the last 100 years, 150 years, they've really adopted. So I think they will continue to adapt themselves in remarkable ways. I think a lot of universities will shut down, and the ones that survive will evolve dramatically to be a lot more career oriented. But um, yeah, so I think they'll adapt dramatically, but universities are the mechanism for education. I think are here to stay.
Right. And the final one, what is the future relevance of books?
I think um, so. For me personally, like I love to read books. So I want to say that like books are probably the best way for people to continue learning and kind of really develop expertise on topics. But I think with online learning, with different types of courses and course formats and so on, I think they will cease to be maybe like the best way to learn. I think they'll be relevant for the timeless topics, uh, but for a lot of the learning that needs to happen, which is much more kind of fast moving and technology, I think digital mediums will overtake books. I mean, they've already overtaken books for most part, but I think that will continue to be the case.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kapish, for giving us this peek into different worlds from product management to the role of MOOCs in future relevance. How should you learn? the kind of experiments that you guys did, and also sort of explain the different persona of learners that you would see at Coursera. And I'm sure there'll be a few people who will be tempted to take a sabbatical after listening to you here on this CTQ Smartcast as well. So thanks a lot for your time here, Kapeesh.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a pleasure, Harish. Thank you for having me.